One of Ireland's most famous carp waters, the Loch, can be found in the busy suburbs of Cork City. This 12-acre limestone lake was once home to the largest Irish carp in Ireland and produced the still-standing Irish carp record of £29 13 ounces to Sidney Kennedy. After a devastating fish kill, this lake was restocked with a large quantity of Irish carp from Decoy Lake. Whilst not producing big fish in the same fashion as it once did, this prolific fishery has a very bright future.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Oddies Angling TV, and today we're coming to you from what is one of the premier carp lakes in the country. This is the Loch in County Cork, in Cork City in fact. Now, I've been fishing this lake for about 20 odd years, give or take, and this is probably one of Ireland's best known fisheries. It's not one of the most pleasant to fish because we're smack bang, as you can see, in the middle of a housing estate. It is a bird sanctuary as well, which means the place is absolutely stuffed full of tufties and coots. And once upon a time, we would have in excess of probably 2,000 or 3,000 swans out there as well, which were a complete nightmare. And they were like a marauding pack of pirates. And they'd come round, and as soon as you drop the bait out, forget about baiting up, but a single bait out, and you'd have 20 swans on you with their heads in the water, and it was just a nightmare. But we did catch fish. Now, the stock has changed over the years. Originally this was the home of the Irish carp record at 29.13, caught by Sidney Kennedy, and the old original stock were from the Don Lenny strain, and that's a very famous strain of carp if you don't know, and that's where all the Redmire carp came from. And apparently back in the day, the same strain that went into Redmire came over here, and some of the fish ended up in here, about 100 or so at the time, and they grew really, really big. This was a home of probably in excess of, I would have said, there was at least 20 pound fish in here, anywhere up to, as we said, up to 30 pound. Now, well, there were a couple of uncaught fish as well. There was a very big common in here. It was hooked a couple of times. And that was over 30 pound. I mean, we saw it as an absolute pig. Now, this is a real shallow lake. It's only about 2.5 feet smack bang in here, and the deepest you'll get out there is about 3.5, 4, maybe a deep hole of 5 foot, but I doubt it. I mean, I've plumbed and pretty much echo sounded the whole lake at this stage, and there's not really much difference. It's quite straight out. There's no lumps, bumps. That said, on the roadside, about 40 or 50 yards out, it's not a gravel hump, but there is a gravel area that's a little bit less silty than the rest of the lake. So, and it runs about 30 yards wide and about 60 yards long on the roadside, and it's about 40 yards out. So that was always a good spot to find and try and fish the back of, just where it gets a bit silty again. Now, this is a real choddy lake. I mean, we've got chods on, we're fishing pop-ups to negate the silt, and I tell you what, it's tough fishing. Now, as I said, the stock has changed over the last while. What we've got here now is the original fish. There was a bit of a fish kill here a couple of years back, and unfortunately a lot of the swans died as well, and we don't know whether that was a connection with the fish dying, but a lot of the old warriors went belly up. And at the same time, a couple of locals who made a fishing club here, the Cork Carp Anglers, they decided to bring in some fish from the Decoy Lake and get them stocked in, and literally thousands of small, tiny, hand-sized carp were put in. Now, roll on a good few years, 5 or 6 years or whatever it is, I'm not sure exactly the time frame, but these fish now have grown. And a lot of those fish are double figures now. There's a lot of small carp that are, because they're spawning in here now. There's a lot of small pasties from sort of a pound up to 5 pound, and I've been plagued by them. I haven't managed to get anything bigger than 6 pound. But there are double figure fish in here, and some of the common carp from the Decoy strain are up around the 20 pound mark, and there's a good huge amount of backup 15s and 16s. There's a good few 18s and a few 19s. So it's certainly worth a look. Now, the biomass of fish in here is massive. This is huge amount of fish. One of the quotes we got was there's nearly 500 kg per acre. That's massive, and it's now become a real easy runs water. Now I say easy, it is winter. We're fishing here in February. It's only the 3rd of February today. We got here on the other night. This is our last day now. We've done just 2 days here, and before we got here there was a couple of lads already fishing. They had, hang on, the first thing you do when you have an occurrence like that is you check out in the water and you look for any tufties, because it's usually a bird. But one thing we found is when you get a knock like that over the weekend, it's usually a small fish, and most of the time they're hooked and they just sit. They don't run, they just sit there. So if this goes again, I'd be inclined to have a hit the rod. But back to the storytelling. A couple of lads that were down here, in a 24-hour period they had about 15 fish, up to 16 pound. And like that, we got a massive high pressure coming over the weekend, which was when we arrived, and it killed the fishing off. So they've not had another thing. There's 3 anglers further down the bank. There's myself and Mark here, 5 in total. Mark's done quite well. Fishing over towards the island, he's bagged 2 12-pounders and a 9-pounder. So he's chuffed with himself, because as I said, it is winter fishing. I've had about 3 or 4 pasties now at this stage. Biggest, as I said, 6 pound. They're all averaging 4 or 5 pound. But don't get me wrong, I'm not pissed off with that. I'm happy bending the rod. It's the first fish of the year for me, so it just, you know, it's a good way to be. Now, one of the things about this place is it's really early. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. It's been raining all night, and so nobody's out. But give it another hour and this place is going to be chock-a-block with walkers, buggies, prams, you name it, people feeding the birds. And what they'll do is they'll stand over your rods looking, and then throwing a load of bread on top of your rods, and all the birds will come in and try. It's a nightmare. But you know what? As much of this place is a nightmare, it has this kind of aura about it that you put up with an awful lot. I mean, at night time, if you're bivvying up like we have done here, at night time you'll have revellers here until 3, 4 in the morning screaming and shouting, and they tend to leave the anglers alone, which is handy. But midweek fishing here is fairly safe. You know, you're fishing in the middle of a city centre, so I can't tell you're going to be safe if you're here. I have been here and I've had 600 quid's worth of rod and reel nicked off the pod during the night. It happens. So, you know, all I'd say is don't come alone. Come with friends if you are just bivvying up. But in general, it's safe enough. But it's a cracking water, and there's a lot of fish to go for. And it's a real runs water, especially when they're on and the high pressure's not here. We've got a bit of low pressure. The fishing's good, and apparently you can have as many as 10, 15 runs in a day. Now, a lot of them tend to be small, but you might get a few good doubles in that. And that's good fishing, especially for this country. Right, this lake is never going to be like it was. It's never going to go back to the former glory of being a record-breaking water. Not in its current state, unless they did a big clean out of a lot of small fish and just left good ground fish here. But I can't see how to ever get that to happen. I don't know how to get that managed on this kind of fishery now. So, as I said, we're here, we're at the Loch, and we're going to pull out a couple of the fish in a second that Mark caught. I've got one that I caught just to show you, the little brother, but Mark has a 12-pounder, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And also we'll have a look at the rigs that we're using as well.
Size 8, chatty, 6mm.
You have a PVA bag on that?
Nope.
Single hook bait?
Single hook bait. Now, 12.7's good enough for me.
What's the weight again?
12.7.
Caught on what?
10mm pineapple popper. Little chod rig. Size 8 choddy hook.
Now we're going to have a quick look at some of the rigs we're using here at the Loch today. Now, if you want to know how to tie any of these, there's no point in me sitting here showing you how to tie them. If you go to the Corda website, Corda have a number of tutorial videos and they're showing you how to make all of these, so you know you can sort yourself out on that. But a couple of the rigs that we're having a lot of success on, well, I myself have had a bit of success on. The first is using a pop-up using what's called the KD rig. Now the KD rig is where they whip the no knot a little bit differently, so you go down 2 turns and pull the hair back on itself and keep whipping down and then come back through the eye. And what that does is it makes the hook stand off very hangy like that, and it really sort of hangs nicely so that when the fish picks up the pop-up, and you use a little split shot underneath the pop-up itself, and what happens is the fish will come in, that'll be sitting on top of any of the chod or silt or whatever, and because it's been lightly balanced with the split shot, it will whiz into the mouth, followed by the hook the wrong way, and when it tries to eject it, that should then come back down and hook them quite nicely. And I've had a lot of the fish on that today. I'm using the soft end stuff by Corda. It's like a coated braid, and the reason for that is because I like coated braids, and this one's nice and soft, which flies in the face of coated braids because the whole idea is you make them stiff. But because we're in a lot of silt and the lead is plugging in quite deep, I reckon it's going in at least 3 or 4 inches, maybe even more. It's allowing this then to come out and sit down on top of it, and the way we're presenting the bait is we're using the foam here, just wrap round the hook like so, and then just cast out. And what that does is that sits up in the water until that dissolves, and then it gently drops down on top of the silt. That's been catching us a few fish. The other thing I've been doing is I've got a little bit of the coating on this end pulled off, and I also have it on about 2 to 3 inches pulled off the other end. And the reason for that is when this plugs in, when the lead plugs into the silt, this will come down with a hinge effect and then sit on top of the silt, and that's the idea. So if not, what would happen is if this plugs in, this could actually come up and stand up off the bottom and then have like a hinge here where this bit is kind of pushed up straight, and it doesn't look very pretty, and I'm sure it doesn't catch many fish. Now, I did try corn. I didn't get anything on the corn, which I'm really surprised at. I had 2 different rigs here. I had the KD rig with the corn. Again, it's the same deal as the boiler rig I've just shown you. It's whipped slightly differently, has a split shot holding the corn just on the bottom. The other rig I was using was a proper pop-up rig, and I was using the usual little eye on the hook just to keep everything balanced, and then the same sort of material again. Did chuck out a maggot rig, and I've had it out for 2 days now, and I thought that would have produced something. Again, absolutely nothing. So I was really surprised, but again, it's the Corda mag clip, a couple of Enterprise floating maggots to keep everything balanced, and then it's just the simple ring and a little bit stripped back, and that's the stiffer end trap, which I wanted to use on this because I've peeled away the bottom part of it. Again, it was just to make it sit down and cause a bit of problems if the fish picked it up, but the fish didn't pick it up, so that's it. But that's the rigs we've used here today. Mark has used pretty much similar variations, and Mark's caught the lion's share of the bigger fish. I've got chod rigs out on one of the rods. I've got normal running setups on the others, and to be honest with you, all are producing. No one rig is out fishing anything else. Mark has caught on all his rods at this stage. I've caught on all of my rods at this stage, and they're all different rigs. So We're using PVA bags. Again, I'm using solid PVA bags. The idea being I'm also trying to keep some air in the PVA bag, and the reason being is I want the situation when the lead plugs into the bottom, I want the bag to sit standing up proud, so that when it then releases the air, it'll actually waft back down and sit on top of the silt. This, as I said, is a really silty lake, and it, you know, you've got to make sure your rigs are going to work. Now, in fairness, our rigs are working. We've all caught fish here. I'm up to, I don't know, 4 fish. Mark's up to 3. Mark's, in fairness, bagged all the big fish. He's had 2 12-pounders plus a 9-pounder. I've had a load of snotty little small carp, but you know what? I'm not grumbling, because it's better than a blank, and it is February. It's the beginning of February, and a fish is a fish at this time of year. You know, it's just luck of the gods of what size it is. But we know the rigs are working, and we know the methods are working. So, all in all, I think we're quite chuffed with ourselves. I happen to nobble this beast of a fish. You're going to be very impressed with this. Now, when you're lifting a fish out of the water, Mark did the same. You check before you lift, you make sure all the fins are tucked under the body and nothing's going to hurt the fish. Now, this is a traditional carp sling. This is a Rod Hutchinson one. And you ready for this beast? Now, people often make a big mistake that when they take a fish out of the water, it's been sacked up for a couple of hours. What's happened is the fish has had time to recover. That's the whole point of sacking them, apart from getting yourself and your kit ready. Do not attempt to lift them until you've let them stay easy on the mat for a minute or 2. The reason being is they're full of vigor, and they're going to jump out your hands every time you try and lift them. So let them have their little moment. Let them just have a chill out on the mat. Keep them in the sack. Now, I told you it was a beast. And there she is. Now, once upon a time, this was a tagged fish. There's a little tag by my thumb here that's come off. They did a lot of tagging to see about growth rates of the fish. Now, this one weighs, I'd say, at least 45 pound. Maybe give it 46 if we're lucky. Might be pushing it. But as you can see, all the walkers are out now, and it's going to start getting busy from now on in, with people walking around the lake. Now, I'm only messing, this is probably only about 2 or 3 pound if I'm to be truthful. But it's a very pretty fish, and these fish will grow quite rapidly in a good water like this. And you know, it won't be long before this is making double figures. So, to bring it back into the water, it's just put it back in the sling. Again, before you lift, you just check to make sure all the fins are in the right direction. Just gently move over to the water, and then just help the fish's head out of the sling or the sack, and away she goes. So this is the PVA mix I'm using. This is what goes in the PVA bag. It's basically a number of different items. There's a lot of maggots. There's both dead maggots that have been frozen, live maggots, a couple of whites, a couple of reds. There's a lot of crushed boilies using the quarter crusher system, which is this yoke here. You put your boilies in, and it's a very quick and simple system. Put your boilies in like so. You close the lid and you twist it around, depending on how well crushed you want them, and it comes out like so. And in goes the powder, give it a bang, and you can quickly make up a fairly decent mix. So there's the base mix, as I said, is the Dynamite's black stim ground bait. It's a cracking ground bait, it's nice and dark. I have chopped up boilies in this, crumbed boilies. I have a number of appetite stimulators such as mainlines, pineapple syrup, and I also have some pineapple goo in there from Cork. And it seems to be doing quite well. It's working well. It puts a nice cloud onto the bottom, and the bits kind of rise and fall during the day while it's out there. You know, it doesn't just stay sitting on the bottom. It's quite an active ground bait, you know, but it's a great PVA bag mix or a stick mix. Yeah, it's working really, really well. Now this is a nice common carp of about £12.15. Mark had her in the wee hours, but cracking looking fish.
Indeed, good scrap. Same area as the previous one. Little chod rig, chocolate malt pop this time. So good scrapper. I actually thought it was going to go heavier because this one has a gut as opposed to the last one, but still very, very pleased. It's February, for goodness sake. Any winter fish is a bonus.
Tell us what you caught it on.
Got it on a 20mm spicy pineapple.
Own recipe or?
Yeah. Okay, we're at the end of the session. It's an interesting venue, as I said. Mark has done quite well. We're on the swing side. This is the swings behind us. Swings are quite famous for being a very noisy place at night time, which they were. I don't think we've really slept too much in the last 2 nights. Revellers here, it's the weekend. Friday night we came at around 10 o'clock. Fished through Saturday day. We fished on through Saturday night, and both Friday night and Saturday night we had a huge amount of people until 3, 4, half 4 in the morning, screaming and shouting behind our tents and running up and down here. We had the police whizzing up and down in their cars and doing spot checks, and a bit of a commotion, and it's really hard to sleep like that, so it's not the most comfortable of fishing, but this lake is what it is. Kind of the reason why we picked this spot, just kind of give you a rundown of the thinking behind it. Now, as I said, we've gone through the baits, we've tried a number of different things, and it's good kind of watching what the other guys are fishing, and they fish on a regular basis and see what they're catching on and see how they're fishing. It's interesting, a little bit different to ours, but going back to the first reason why we fished at this spot is a westerly blows over to the far bank. Southwesterly is into that corner. This is the eastern bank, and therefore when the sun comes up and it peeks over those houses over there right in front of us, what you get is a real warming up of this bank, and it heats up real fast. And with the protection of the houses and the trees, you know, you don't get a heavy wind on this side, so it, you know, being shallow water, it does heat up quicker. And experience in the years fishing here has shown me that the fish like, especially in winter, to hang around these areas rather than the roadside. Would we have caught on the roadside? Who knows? Don't know, didn't try it, but we fished here. Mark ended up with 3 fish, 2 12-pounders, one that was nearly 13 and a 9. I ended up with 4 fish, lost 1 other. Mine were all pasties, unfortunately. They're all sort of 3 to 6 pound in weight. But do you know what? We said it already, February fishing is always going to be hard. We've caught, we've come, we've enjoyed ourselves. Now, looking at all the lads down the way, they're using big baits, 20 millers, even something bigger, 22 millers. Pop-ups fished on a chod rig, and the baits they're using are fluorescent pink, fluorescent yellow, real in-your-face stuff. And it's catching for them, it's working. Myself and Mark tried different things. We tried corn, maggots. Maggots actually didn't work, and I'm really surprised why, you know, they should have done, but they really didn't. What we ended up doing was fishing, you know, pop-ups ourselves in different guises, chods, and then sort of the KD rigs, and, you know, bringing everything down slowly onto the silt, or pulling out the silt and using foam to keep the bait up off the bottom while we pulled the, you know, unplugged the lead. So yeah, it's been an interesting. I would do everything differently if I came back again. I mean, everything differently. I would be fishing mainly chods. I'd be fishing very bright hook baits and big boilies, so that I have a chance of getting through to the slightly bigger fish. That said, Mark caught his fish on tiny little pop-ups. I think they were 12 millers, were they? 10 millers. So, you know, chuck out your rig, you're in with a chance. I mean, it is a prolific fishery nowadays, and there was a good stock of fish, an awful lot of small pasties though. And you've got to wade through a few of them to get to the bigger stuff. I think where, you know, looking at the 2 guys who fished the best on this weekend was Mark and the guy at the very end. All of us bunched up in the middle sections, and we all tend to kind of group together for protection on this place. It didn't help us, and you know, in hindsight, sitting on the edge where you've got a bit more open water, and the fish, you know, obviously are getting a bit pressured out of this area, pushing out and pushing over to the snags, and down the, you know, the other end. It's a typical fishing scenario. Guys in the middle catching out, guys on the end are picking off fish. That's fishing though. You live, you learn, and you hopefully change your tactics the next time and catch a few. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. We'll be back very shortly with some review vids, and we'll talk soon. If you're looking to stock up on some new fishing gear, end tackle or bait, then we suggest you take a look at mainirishangling.com for the cheapest prices in Ireland.